We are live. I am here. It's Tevis Trower, author of Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success, and founder of Balance Integration, organizational nerd, and lover of leadership. Lover not just of the power structures of leadership, but the ways in which human beings all around us battle those demons inside and give ourselves permission to step forward and the truth of who we are. So that's why I started this series. People ask me all the time, why do you do that? Do you make money? Like, well, it's not about that. I feel like in times of conflict, in times of evolution, and what moment isn't a time of evolution? No more than now. But in times like this, it's really vital that we share our truth and that we share who we are. And so I am extremely pleased that you show up and you play this and you let it hopefully speak to your heart. That's really the intention, and tease open your imagination of what might be possible for you. So before we dive in with my guest, who's fabulous, quick tech note, we are live streaming from LinkedIn, YouTube, 2 places on Facebook. If you post a comment and we don't get back to you, I know that both of us solemnly swear to follow up and to answer what you said. If we do see it live real time, we will absolutely call it forth. So thank you so much. I'm thrilled. Today I have Miss Buddy Valentine. And Buddy, you guys may not know this. Like, if you're local to Hudson Valley, you probably can't not know Buddy Valentine. And the first time I met Buddy, I even forget where, but I was just so struck with her gentle presence and her love and her playfulness. And as Hudson Valley has started to boom, I mean, people play this from all over the world, but basically what's happened is, because even prior to the pandemic, people were fleeing the city and coming to Hudson Valley, which is a collection of hamlets along the river. I am so thrilled there's so many heroes and so many creators and so many really genius individuals in small towns all over the world who show us what it means to stand in their own skin. And Buddy, you are one of those for me, and I know for many, many, many of us. So thank you for taking time out.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be here. Thanks for having me.
So true confessions, Buddy has not done a lot of this, because even though she is a huge influencer just by her being, she's this whole camera thing. Yeah. But so I'll be gentle.
Oh yeah, I know, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And I've never done. I don't think I've ever done a live. So this is exciting. I'm like, it's my first right here. It's my first night.
Your sphere of influence has been simply by showing up, and I think truly showing up. So before we dive into all the ways in which you show up, I want to ask you my favorite question. What did you love to do as a young one? And the reason I ask this is because it gets us into our truth and it takes the mask off a little bit, and we get to talk about what we love.
Oh, fun. I love it. Well, I would say I loved watching TV. That was like a big...
God. That is a first.
Yeah, I loved watching TV. I would like in 3rd grade, I would run home to watch Wonder Woman, like on TV at that time. Yeah, there were like strong female characters. I mean, I guess you could debate, I'm sure you could recontextualize a lot of that now through the male gaze, etc. But for me as a kid, I was like, oh my God, like I loved to just watch, Diana Prince like turn and become Wonder Woman. And so like Charlie's Angels and I don't know, The $1 Million Woman and Nancy Drew and The Love Boat and all those shows. So I loved that. And then when I was really little, I guess around when I was like in 3rd grade, I did also like to bake. So I had like a easy bake oven. And I also had this little chocolate shop where you could it worked in the same technology as Easy Bake. Like you would put pieces of chocolate into this like chocolate factory and it would melt them into a mold. and then you could set them up like on your shop counter.
Oh my God, he's making my mouth water if I like start wiping my mouth.
And I must say, I've never, ever, ever met anyone that had the chocolate shop. So one of these days.
Anyone listening who had the chocolate shop, you owe it to us and yourself to come on out.
Yeah, I mean, the Easy Bake Oven, I can, that's almost universal. But
do you still bake?
I don't. No, I don't. But I like it. I like cooking. I don't really do it. Oh, but I talk a lot about baking actually in my most recent book. So yeah, I guess it is. I do think I love the visual, I think also, yeah, I think baking, there's that quality of just like, it's hard to look at a cake and not feel, joy, basically.
No, it's really an interesting thing. Oh, we just got a note. Sorry about that, you guys. Actually, I don't know if we can. It's so weird how it's doing that. But okay, I'm just going to move ahead. It's interesting because I've led wellness immersions in corporations, right? At Bloomberg and the MBA and KKR and a number of companies. And one of the things that is so profound is the emotional experience, really primordial experience of nurturing and food. Mm. And specifically comfort foods that tell us everything's okay. So that whole thing about baking, I mean, that's the Mac Daddy of that whole conversation. So I want to ask you, what did you think you would be when you grew up as a little one?
Oh, I remember taking a one of those tests, but it was like for kids. I mean, this was probably like in 4th grade, and it actually did say that I was best suited to be a baker. But I wasn't.
You got work to do. You got some bacon.
That's right. It's in me. But no, I think I definitely thought, oh yeah, that always, even as a kid, that idea of like also of service, of like having a simple thing that you do for others. Like I liked that. But I think I wanted to be a ballet dancer. Like Baryshnikov, that was like my little fantasy. But I never really took ballet. I never really applied myself.
You're not dead yet.
That's right. That's right.
By the way, last I checked, classes are happening.
Yeah. Well, me and a few other people, we did organize an adult ballet class. This was many years ago.
That's
and it was at Ann Hebard, and they still have classes today. But in my mind, I just thought I would be like a natural. Like I would just be like naturally good at it. And it was harder than I thought, but I liked it a lot.
Well, I could read you a laundry list of things I thought I'd be natural at, but then get into it and you got to slug through. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the area?
I grew up in suburban Chicago.
Oh.
So Illinois, in the suburbs.
And how did you end up in the Hudson Valley?
I kind of moved around a little bit when I was younger. Like I lived in San Francisco and I lived in Chicago proper. And I wanted to be a fashion designer later. That probably started more in like middle school. Is that what they call it? Middle school? Who
knows what they call it?
I feel like it changes. Junior high. I think that's what we called it. Junior high. We didn't say middle school. Okay. Maybe that's a Midwest thing. I don't know. But and then I wanted to be a fashion designer. So I went to New York City and I went to study fashion, and it's similar. I took like one class and I was like, oh, I can't do it.
You're like, this is way more complex.
This is too hard. So I lived in the city for many years, like 20 years, I think. And then I moved up to the Hudson Valley, which I love. I really, when I grew up in the suburbs, I was always planning my escape. And then when I lived in New York City, I just thought, oh my gosh, how great. Like I couldn't imagine myself anywhere else. And this is just so much better. I love it so much better.
Don't say that.
I know.
It sucks here.
No, I'm trying to be, it's controversial, but I'm trying to be welcoming to the new people.
Oh, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I know, we
Believe
really
me.
don't. We
Believe me.
really don't. But, I just feel like, no, I am, I'm going to say, they're here. Like being mean to them isn't going to stop them from coming, I think.
Yeah.
So I think there's other ways to hopefully, grow. They're helping us grow, and we just have to try and like help it grow in the right ways.
So tell folks how you ended up being an author of a book on depression, because I want to point out, what year did you end up starting the series?
Oh gosh, I think I've done it for like 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Yeah. So 3 or 4 years, really before the whole mental health conversation became so mega mainstream. Corporations are talking about mental health. I mean, what gave you the gumption to step out and say, I understand depression and I have experienced it? And I'm going to just do a little enter on the chat here so you guys can look at his book, because it's genius, and we'll talk about all the ways it's genius. But what gave you the courage to step forward on something that even as recently as 2 years ago, to tell someone, well, I've dealt with depression, could carry so much, oh, what's wrong with you? Are you on meds? How are you now? Are you okay? Should I be like, what really drove you to step out in that way?
Well, in terms of like my own personal experience, so I'm bipolar, but I wasn't officially diagnosed till like much later in my life, like in my 30s. So I definitely had these periods where, I would be really depressed, and then I would have these periods where I was really creative and really productive, and and I could kind of get through them. And I think as you get older, if it's not really treated, it can be, more difficult. Or anyways. Yeah. So both those things became greater problems, and I ended up in, I'd been in some mental hospitals a little bit, and I think that I would say probably that those would be like the best things that ever happened to me.
Oh, wow.
Even one time when I was in San Francisco, maybe I'm like 21, and I was like I was just in a really bad place, and I was, brought to the hospital, and I was just there overnight, and it was a terrible experience. It was horrible. I remember lying in this room. It was just like a big room full of beds, and, people were crying, and like the TV's just running all night, and not that hasn't been my experience otherwise, but even in that little experience, something about that, it did help me. So my more recent stays, I guess, at mental hospitals have been longer, like maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and you're talking a lot with other people that have the same challenges as you. And I went to a really great place called Four Winds, which is in Katona, not far. And so there's a lot of like group therapy work, and people would say really great things like, oh, like this one woman was like, something that really helps me when I'm depressed is geocaching. And I didn't really know what geocaching was. Do you know what that is? Or
it's the coolest thing ever.
I know, it's amazing.
But I'm like a nerd. I'm like a voyeur. I go hiking geocaches out there, and I'm like, who are these cool people who have this as a hobby?
Yeah. So that's like her hobby. And, and I was like, oh, I never heard of that before. So I'd write it down. So I just started writing notes and, things that I thought sounded really good to try. And the list, as I became sort of like as I began trying things, seeing what worked for me, like something about riding on a bike is always really helpful for me. Things like that, little things. So I just started making a list so I could go to it. And then the list just became a book series. I had hundreds of things. And so I thought, oh, what would be a fun way to try and organize this?
Yeah.
So the book series is called Rainbows. And each, it's like a 50-page book that organizes maybe around 10 or so tips under the umbrella of a color. So, so like pink ends up being about exercise a lot because I just thought of like jazzercise, like 80s aerobics. And that was sort of like my color association. But yeah, it talks about baking and some other things related to pink.
I love it. And I have a couple of your books. I don't have all of them. But so you gave yourself permission to step outside of the stigma of bipolar. Do you think that you were bipolar your whole life? Because a lot of times I've read that this is really adult onset, right? That it's really almost an experiential surfacing of the fragmentation of what we experience in society, right? And I'm just curious, do you feel like you were always bipolar, or that this really started to take shape as you became an adult?
I definitely wouldn't say I felt that way. Like I genuinely, truly, even though of course there were like mean kids in school, like I
Yeah.
truly had a happy childhood. Like I would never say like, oh, I never felt depressed or, but yeah, when I went to college, um,
Yeah.
there's certain things that like kind of trigger it, and I think that was
Mhm.
just like a very big life change for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't really know what it was for a really long time.
Yeah. Do you think it helps to have a name to give things?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so. I'm only hesitating because in other ways, I would say no. But I think I think that in in this case, yeah, like yes, I do.
Yeah. Because I know some people don't want to put a name, whether they have a child who has a deviation. I don't even know how to appropriately say that, but some of us don't want to be labeled.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to be called things, and I think that if you go back to even the old poem, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would not smell as sweet," right? I am very aware that the ability to identify, but to hold these names not as a reality or identity, but as just part of a map. And then a map is not the territory, right? If it were the territory, it would be a replica of the world. A map and words are maps, right? They are abstractions. And so I'm really grateful to you for saying that for you, you found that having a way, a word, an abstraction, an expression has been helpful for you.
Yeah, I think so. I do appreciate though, like I think there are things where like I have a friend that is, going through some health problems and she asked me to kind of send her some and I did sort of tell her like a story, but I also sent her some photos because I feel like sometimes I do like that you don't put something into words, lost in translation, like we don't really know what Bill Murray said to, and I don't need to know. I love mystery.
Yeah,
So I appreciate both. I do. And
yeah,
I think I also think words can be um can mean what you want them to mean. Like there are words that I just don't like. I just don't like the way they sound. So like I just kind of like scoot around them, and so like uh if the word like for example, like, I'm trans. And I like like people are like, oh, well, you don't look, how can you call yourself transgender when you're not transitioning?
Mm.
And I just feel like I don't, I don't, just like non-binary just doesn't totally, that just doesn't fit for me, though it may fit for someone else. And trans and non-binary really can more or less be the same. I mean, you can debate all you want, but I think to me, trans, I like it just short, trans. It's like, yo.
Well, it's a cuter, hipper, more powerful word than non.
It's just like, yeah, it's just like it
Binary
feels,
sounds like
right.
science. Trans
Yeah,
sounds
and I think
like
that's, yeah,
dance,
I think
right?
so. Non-binary too, isn't that just uh,
Yeah,
reinforcing the binary in the
yeah,
word? So yeah, trans means beyond.
yeah. Wow.
So I
So,
think I just was going to say
yeah,
that, yeah, I think a word can both clarify something, but I think then you can add your
yeah.
mystery to it.
The word should be the starting place. It's funny.
Yeah.
When my mom died, it was my first real primary experience of death, and people would tell me to journal. And I would be like, but these words are so lame compared to what I'm feeling. And kind of like what you said about a picture, right? That you were sending your friend who was having a hard time a picture. I found that it was so much more helpful for me to really get to my heart to go nonverbal, right? And to go into painting and I didn't even play any music at the, I still am struggling. I'm a beginner, but I would just pick up a guitar and just pluck a string and just moan to it, essentially. And I think that that's one thing I've really loved about your book is that the experience of your book series is not limited to the word, although words are beautiful and powerful and poetic, and you have your own way. It's kind of like an E.E. Cummings
Mm.
type license you've given yourself of how you express these really complex but very universal. Because I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're the happiest person on the planet, you have struggled, right? And I just want to urge people to take a look at your book because you're not just an author, you're an artist in this book, and the images and the creativity that you bring to it. Did you think of yourself as a designer prior to saying, you know what, damn it, I'm just going to write one chapter, and if it comes out every couple of years, that's fine. Did you think of yourself as a designer, or did it just happen?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, I knew that I wanted it to be visual, and I'm really, I love what you said because I'm sort of um, like I'm used to it now as a kind of combination of word and image, and hearing what you said just reminds me like, oh, why the image part of it is important. Um, So yeah, I think I had done more graphic design. I've probably done more graphic design than I have writing, um, in my, work life.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, yeah, I call myself a writer now, but I don't, I'm not, I'm not comfortable calling myself really a designer or an artist. But a writer feels a little bit like, and it's not that I feel most comfortable with it. It just feels like,
Okay, I just gotta bust you because anyone watching this is looking at that gorgeous yarn wall behind you, which is an art installation you made with your own little paws, right?
yeah,
It is,
thank
it's a, like, I want one.
you. Thank you.
So isn't it funny that there are words that are just so hard for us to step into, and it's that whole validity thing, right? That's it.
It goes
It's
back
that
to,
whole like, can I call myself beautiful, right? Can I call myself a musician? Can I call myself smart? So you just outed yourself as demurring on, oh, am I really an artist? So I'm just gonna.
yeah, I feel like in a not that I ever go to cocktail parties. But it's sort of like, oh, what
They're
do you
so
do? I feel
dumb. At
better.
this point, they just feel so dumb.
I
Anyway,
feel just feel better like being like, oh, I'm a writer than I'm an artist. I don't know why, but I do feel like
yeah.
I think just what you were saying, it is. I think most artists feel that way, or maybe most people in most professions feel like maybe they haven't yet earned that title.
Mm.
But that's
You
silly.
know, what they say to you when you first start to write is the only thing you have to do to write is to write, to be a writer is to write. And the only thing you have to do to be an artist is to create. And I really stand vehemently behind that because you are creating art. So maybe you can work that into your little next chapter
Oh,
on,
okay.
on impression. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but stepping into she, right?
Yeah.
The word artist
We're
was
talking a lot
not
about words today. I love
right.
it.
Yeah, no, this has become a word
Okay.
fest. And
We
should
are
call it
writers.
bananagram. Have you ever played bananagrams?
Bananagrams.
Oh my God, we're gonna have to play
Okay.
bananagrams. It's so much fun. Anyway, side note, sorry you guys. So you wouldn't give yourself permission to call yourself an artist, but you have really stepped into she, her womanhood, right? You've really stepped into the soul searching of how have I always felt on this planet, and you've allowed yourself to step into those words. And I'm a I'm a dork. I have to ask the really uncomfortable questions that we're all afraid to ask. But what has that been like for you?
It's really been amazing. I think it's similar. I do certainly have moments where where I'm like, can I call myself that? Um, but when I do, it just feels great. And like when people do, it feels amazing. That's like the same with, my it wasn't Buddy was, is my chosen name. And, it was similar. Like once I sort of became comfortable asking people to call me that. And I honestly I hate social media so much, but I have to say that I just did a post on Instagram like, oh, my name is Buddy now. And
Oh, we will all reshare it. We're gonna look for you on Insta and
the
reshare.
other
Yeah.
the next day I saw people, this was back when Kingston, where you would like, you'd walk down the street and you'd see people you knew in Uptown. But, right away people called me Buddy. And to me, that just to hear that name sounds like I love you. It's like a choice that we all have to, just like you want to be a writer, I'm going to call you a writer because, that's who you are, and I think that just to have your family and friends support you in that way, even when, maybe there isn't the same kind of evidence, like I do really believe you have to step into things. Like you can call yourself a writer before you actually have started writing. I think you have to start writing.
Yeah.
But
yeah, just
yeah, that's fine. So I think and I think about it a lot. Like I do think too, like what do I like, am I gonna look more like a woman? And that part I thought once I came out and I sort of like explored that would sort of become more clear, and it really hasn't. So I guess it's kind
you're
of
in the process.
I guess so. It's also a little bit like what we were saying about like words versus images. Like the image of the girl in my mind, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's similar. Maybe it's just like I was saying when I went to fashion school. Like I was like, oh, it's too hard. Maybe my mind is doing the same thing where I'm like thinking about trying to look more like
Conforming
course,
to like a
like of course there's infinite range of gender expression. But anyways, for now I feel good here. And in my mind, I think all the time about how much I was a girl always.
Always, yeah.
That for sure.
Was
Always.
it, do you think it was harder to come out as being gay back when you identified as a man? Was it harder to come out as being gay, or has this been, I'm just curious.
I would say this has been harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I had a thought I wanted to share. I don't know if it's related, but maybe.
I
It's
don't
just,
care if it's related.
it's something that I do actually spend a lot of time thinking about my um, childhood and like, was I just trying to pick, like I never had male friends ever.
Hmm.
Actually, until I moved to the Hudson Valley in my 40s.
Wow.
I never met men that I thought were like interesting. Even gay men, I just was kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, I couldn't relate. Anyhow, so I think a lot about, and I was thinking last night about how when I was, so now, like I was listening to something on the radio and it was all men being interviewed, and it was just like so boring. And I just like, I can't stand like, and I'm gonna trash men, I don't care. But like,
This is a learning moment, guys.
yes, I have a point.
Okay.
I have a point.
Stay with it. Okay,
Yes.
buddy, go ahead.
My point is that, so, or like my mom took me to see, I don't know, this movie with like all men in it. It was like a war movie or something like that. And I was just like, I need a woman in every scene for me to hold interest. So typically, like, I prefer reading books that are like narrated by, women. I only really like TV shows with women. And so, anyways, I was just thinking this morning, that's always been that way for me. Like, I've always zeroed in on like the secretary in the back as the most important character in the scene. And I think it's because I never thought about it until this morning. Like, I just never felt safe with men. And like, my mother was always like really supportive of me. I didn't really have a father figure. And so like, I just never ever felt safe around them. So that's all. That's my point. I just like was just kind of realizing that.
Well, I think it's really interesting to look back on our constants, right? Because a lot of our constants will tell us information about ourselves. And if we look at them with curiosity, right, as opposed to looking for a conclusion about them, a lot of times, kind of like the power of the word, right? The word can either shut down possibility or it can open up possibility. And I really see that in you, and I see that in this evolving relationship of what it is for you to be embodied on the planet in this lifetime, and how do you be true to yourself. And I just really want to applaud you, because I think that's what all of us are longing for. And whether it's a gender question, whether it's what title we give ourselves, whether it's do we like hanging out with a certain kind of people or not, like I really feel like so much of, everyone's talking about empathy and compassion. Well, the only way we're going to have empathy and compassion for others is if we start to understand ourselves. And so I just want to, so Buddy has this awesome, I want you to show what your hat actually says. because Buddy, I mean, I can't say you didn't influence. Even before, like a year and a half ago when I made these silly little hats, I can't say, and yeah, they match the color and everything, but I cannot claim that I was not plagiarizing you in some way. I mean, it's kind of obvious. Of course, he's cuter. He does it, or she. I'm so see.
Oh my gosh, we have to hang out and just like.
I know. We live like 3 miles apart from each other. Yeah. Okay, parting question.
Yeah.
Because I was reflecting on this prior to our call. And by the way, everyone, just a reminder, we don't script any of this stuff. This is just two people talking. So you're the flies on the wall, and please feel free to weigh in. But I was really thinking, I was wondering, because I remember Pride 20 years ago. I remember having gay friends in high school, right? I remember, because I was the girl with the mohawk and the dyed hair and smoking cigarettes in the smokers lounge back when they existed, and like just everything, right? And I remember even in the 90s when some of my friends were struggling to come out, I had this recognition that that path was going to get easier, right? And that part of the transformational process of struggling to be who we are is the strength it shows us that we have inside of ourselves. And I started wondering, because we have gone through a backlash, right? We've come out of a political era in which being gay or being trans or being anything other than white, cis, right, is somewhat. And I'm wondering, because I've seen the jubilance, and I've seen that so many of my straight friends who have never commented on Pride. And do you think that there is a beauty that has come from this oppression that has been attempted? Do you think that there's been any upside?
I do think, like, this year, I feel like Pride has had its like biggest numbers ever. It just felt very everywhere. Maybe on social media, and I think it's felt very celebratory this year in so many different ways. Like, I have a design podcast that I follow, and they were talking about Pride, and and like food, and but I don't. I'm not going to give the oppression any kind of value, in making.
Oh, yeah, I get it. It's a tough.
I think that we did that, and I'm sure, I mean, without question, we all grow from struggle. So, I think that is also true.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if that's an insensitive question. I think that part of why I ask it is, like, even hearing today that Bill Cosby has been pardoned, right? That it's a moment, that it's a moment of like, do we cave or do we rise up? And how much awareness is brought by things not feeling right? So anyway, thank you for being patient, and thank you for opening your heart, and thank you for sharing everything that you've shared about your journey. You are definitely a game changer, Buddy Valentine.
Thank you, Tevis. So great to be here, and really great to talk with you.
So cool. So you guys, next week, and Buddy, y'all look up his book. It comes out like a chapter every now and then.
Yeah.
And what, you're on your fourth chapter?
Yeah, I'm working on my fourth one.
It's going to be 10 total, correct?
Yeah.
Each one for a color of the rainbow. So it's not like overwhelming. You can get one chapter at a time. Right. I promise you, it will be the book that you're like, I'm really glad I have this little book, because it's all that. So thank you, Buddy. You hang tight. I got to say something to these folks. Okay. So next week, I am not sure I'm having a broadcast, because I'm going to a funeral, and I'm also going to the sequoia forest to see beautiful trees and be with some of the most beloved people from early in my life. But I will keep you posted if I do have one, and I really encourage you, please comment and share. And if something in this conversation made you think of someone, send it to them, because you never know. You may really touch someone's heart, and that would be my greatest pleasure, to help be a vehicle of that. So thank you so much. We do have a game changer intensive. No, it's fun. coming up in September. So if you want to give yourself more permission to step into your truth without blowing up your job or marriage or whatever, then I'm your girl. Okay, so hit me up and share, like, and love each other. Happy Pride, y'all.
I love you. You're so great.